Welcome to the Old Soul, New Soul. I think we're going to call this a Pod-Nouncement, not a podcast. Pod-Nouncement, because Robert has something that he wants to let you know about that we're doing and solicit some of your help. And maybe you can help us with some of the content of something that he's working on. We'll tell you about that at the end. But the topic here is relationships. You know, we've been running an announcement here lately that we are doing a relationship course. It's going to be about, I think, 5 hours in the range of that. Relationships are one of the top reasons that people solicit an astrologer for a reading. You know, it seems like, Robert, if you're in one, you want to know how to get out. If you're out of one, you want to know how to get in one. And then in general, you want to know, what about Venus? What about the mystery around it all? The seventh house of partnerships and relationships. So you've done readings since forever. And when you encounter somebody with a relationship question, what are some of the things that they're generally about?
Well, exactly what you say, because these are probably the most important, really, and common questions brought to an astrologer is how we relate to people, and particularly in romance and marriage and so on. And astrology, what I'm working on is basically an expanded version of some courses that I have taught in the past on this subject. Basically, I think when I first gave this 15, 20 years ago, it was called something like 101 Tips on Relationships, just based on my years of practice. But it's such an important part of astrology because one secret right off the bat is the moon signs. The moon is habits. It's your unconscious. It's how you are to live with on a day-to-day basis, not your sun sign, your moon sign. And if the moon signs are not compatible, if they're in conflict, the couple will experience the same conflicts in the relationship. And they're meant to be developmental. It's not to say don't get with somebody whose moon is in a hard aspect to your moon. It's not that. But you can certainly expect more challenges and developmental challenges in that kind of relationship than when the moons are in harmony. Because when the moons are in harmony together, the people's daily routines, all ruled by the moon, their daily habits, how they are at home, alone, in private, those two things, when they're in harmony, make living together for a long time a lot easier. So that's just one tip.
Well, we're recording this podcast, this Pod-Nouncement, under Venus retrograde. It just went retrograde a little bit ago. So it's a good time to reflect on our relationships. So, Robert, for this course that you're putting together, how could people help you?
Well, that's the main point of doing this, I think, Thomas, is because I've realized that we get so many questions about relationships as private astrologers and also with these podcasts that I thought I would love to hear from some of the listeners. They can be questions about astrology in general and relationships. What does the seventh house mean? What's the difference between Venus and Mars? Do they need to be compatible? And so on. Those kinds of questions. Or they can be, we've already gotten some from people who have a very personal question, and in fact they've asked us not to use their names or the name of the partner that they're talking about, which we will never do. We're not going to break any confidences there, but if you will leave your questions, we can use some of those questions to form new sections of this, say, 5-hour course in these different relationship secrets that astrology provides you if you know where to look.
What kind of questions are you looking for that people, if they had such a question, that would work for this?
Thomas, I would encourage any kind of question, truly, because if it's too complicated for it, we obviously can't answer every question. So if it's too complicated, we won't. But don't be afraid to ask a question. It's up to you whether you include real names or not, because we're not going to use real names. We may use the actual birth information, the date and the time and place and so on, if we're using charts, which we will be doing, but they won't be personalized in any way. So you've got the fifth house, which is romance. You've got the seventh house, which is committed relationships, like living together or getting married. You've got things like Venus and Mars, the sun and the moon to consider in both charts, et cetera, et cetera. So suddenly you're getting into a whole reading, which we can't do. But don't hesitate. Don't censor yourselves with a question. Send us anything, and the ones that we can use will be incredibly helpful. They already have been.
All right, perfect, good. Well, this is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to this. It is such an incredibly hot topic. And, people right now are struggling with relationships on several fronts. I know broadly. One of the things I hear commonly out there is how hard good guys are to find. Robert?
Well, I got to tell you, in this day and age, the internet has replaced relationships for many people. Think about it. We get a lot of stimulation from the internet and from what you and I are doing, Zoom and all these interactive things and games and blogs and all of this. And people can easily become unknowingly addicted to the internet, and it replaces relationships in their lives. And so you see couples that have been together for 6 months having lunch together in a restaurant, not talking to each other. Each one has their cell phones in their faces. So these things, this has absolutely affected intimacies and relationships and marriages and relationships with children and the whole shebang. So it's a different world that we live in now, because we have stimuli coming at us from all these different directions that we never have had before. And they're competing really for time and interest with relationships with spouses and with children. So that's one phenomena that's with us forever.
You mentioned the fifth house. Tasteful sexuality questions, are they game?
Tasteful or not, they're game.
Okay. All right. So it's fifth house, eighth house. We could go taboo if you want. All right. Well, and this is so valid, because in a relationship, if somebody is having an issue and sexual fulfillment is not happening, that's a question. Bring it on. We'll take it.
And those are the kinds of things that do show up in astrology, Thomas. You can have a partner who has a strong sex drive, let's say. And that can be the man or the woman. And the other partner really doesn't. So the sexual drives are completely different. And that can be an area that needs to be discussed between the couple. It really comes down to communications with me in life. And most people have trouble communicating about these kinds of intimate problems without a therapist. If you have a third party, a professional therapist, then you can be a little more objective maybe about it. But most couples don't have the training. They don't have the background to have these kinds of talks with each other constructively. And so sometimes these things can devolve into arguments and so on. So it's a fascinating area, astrology and love and romance and marriage.
Well, and right around the corner from that, I'll bet one you could do is fertility questions. If somebody had, couples trying to conceive and they wanted some help from the chart, that's probably a pretty simple one, right?
Well, it's not necessarily simple, but I just had one yesterday, exactly the same thing. And this was with the husband in this case. And the first thing I said to him really was just looking at his horoscope, because he mentioned something about, we wanted to look at his marriage. He mentioned that in the email. So we started looking at it. First thing I said to him, starting the reading, I said, "Are you and your wife thinking about getting pregnant?" And he said, "Yeah, we've been talking about it." So that's what we started with. Fertility absolutely does come up. And there are methods that you can use that were, with me anyway, I was first exposed to Dr. Jonas, who was a Czechoslovakian physician, and his methods with fertility. And by George, they work. At least they have. In my 58 years of practice, I've been astonished, but they really do work. I had a woman come to me. She was pregnant, Thomas, and she wanted to know whether it was going to be a boy or girl. And I started looking at her. I said, "How far along are you?" And she said, I forget what, 3 months, 4 months. And I looked in the ephemeris using Dr. Jonas's methods, and I said, according to this, you're not quite that pregnant. And I said, "Let me ask you, did you get pregnant out of town with your husband?" And she said, "Oh my God, I think we did. We were in Washington, D.C. See, so again, these methods, I'm a skeptic by nature. Don't ask how I've done this I'm not a skeptic any longer after 58 years, but really to start out with, I've always had a kind of skeptical, does this really work? In this case, it did. So fertility is certainly another issue.
All right, awesome. Well, folks, I think you can see that there's a broad spectrum here of relationship areas. And, okay, so the rule is don't filter yourself. I like the way that Robert said that. How do you leave this? Well, a couple of ways. You can go to the funastrology.com website. Up at the top left is an orange button. That's our speak pipe. If you want to leave a voice message, we can use those in the course, or we can just extract from it. Tell us whether or not we can use your voice. We need your permission, or else we won't. The other way you could do it is to email your question directly to Robert. Robert Glasscock at sbcglobal.net. And that link is also in the show notes. So Robert Glasscock at sbcglobal.net. He's fine if you just email him the question. He's not going to answer it in a reading. He can book a reading, but the idea is just to send him the question, and then he'll filter through all of these and decide what and how to use what comes in. So we hope that helps. This is kind of a fun project. Robert, thank you for this. This is the first time we've opened something up and said, hey, well, we take the listener questions all the time, but hey, you can be a part of this course, and it's going to be fun. Now, as far as the timing is concerned on this is in the now. So please go ahead, and if you have a question, or, take some time to think of one, but go ahead and send it to us right now, because this is in development. All right. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on Old Soul, New Soul Astrology Podcast with Robert Glasscock. Thanks for listening and for your questions.